Right, we have apologies from Councillor Davis and from Councillor Wright for this evening.
Thanks, Lucy. And any declarations of interest this afternoon? No declarations of interest. So we do have a public question. And the public question is in the name of Abigail Murray and Fiona Lego. I think they're about to appear on our screens. Do we have them on? Do we have Abby and Fiona on video? Okay. So can I welcome you both to the meeting? Thank you for taking the time to join us and to ask your questions. So is it Abby? Are you reading your question?
Yes, I'm reading the question.
Okay, Abby. So please go ahead.
As a resident of Rosary Road, we have for some years suffered antisocial behaviour from the street prostitutes. Even during these times of COVID, we are still experiencing regular disturbances. We're frequently woken up by shouting and screaming all night long. Neighbours and friends are harassed on the street and while parking their cars by prostitutes soliciting them. We often find used condoms and needles in the area. We've also reported human faeces in Old Library Wood and in our back alley. These local problems are documented in emails to councillors and the police have been raised and have been raised at SNAP meetings as well as by this council's scrutiny committee, which previously referred the matter to the Cabinet. I've also reported them via the City Council website and to the police. We're aware that a PSPO renewal is required in autumn 2020 and that this renewal offers a good opportunity for the area covered by a PSPO to be extended and for additional types of antisocial behaviour to be covered. We would like the areas around Rosary Road, Old Library Wood, King Street and Mousehold Street to be covered by PSPOs focusing on street prostitution and curb crawlers. We know that this PSPO extension is supported by Thorpe Hamlet Ward councillors and we thank them for their help so far. Other councillors who have attended the SNAP meetings at which a PSPO extension has been discussed will also be aware of the strength of feeling from residents on this subject. The police also have appeared to show some support for the idea. Recommendations from the Scrutiny Committee were discussed at the Cabinet meeting on the 11th of March 2020, where senior officers said that PSPOs could be useful and effective. We were disappointed not to receive further support at that time. We are sure that Cabinet members must be just as keen as we are to eliminate this type of antisocial behaviour, and therefore we ask for a commitment to supporting PSPOs in the east of Norwich to help combat these activities which make life so difficult for residents.
Thank you very much, Abigail. Councillor Kevin Maguire, who has got the portfolio responsibility on the Cabinet for this area, is now going to respond to your question.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your question, Ms. Lego and Ms. Murray, because it comes at a time most after sight. Everyone is reviewing personal safety and we are within that climate of pandemic. So I'm pleased to have the opportunity to advise and explain the action which the Council has taken and the proposals to renewal of the existing PSPOs which are currently being reviewed. The public space protection orders which are currently being reviewed are for the management of dog fouling across the city and the management of alcohol and associated antisocial behaviour in the city centre. The Council has been working with the police to address the matters which you raise, and part of this is using the existing legal powers available to the police and the Council to address and to prevent antisocial behaviour. The supporting evidence provided by the police for the management of alcohol and associated antisocial behaviour is being reviewed together with any other areas that should be considered. Any designation of a PSPO requires a clear pattern of evidence and for it to be seen to be proportionate for the issue it is setting out to resolve. The issue of street sex working is complex, and any additional enforcement powers deployed does require a response to help support those street sex workers out of the business. Otherwise, it risks displacing the issue rather than resolving it through an enforcement approach alone. The reference to a PSPO targeting curb crawlers would, I believe, create the same issue. And my understanding is that this has been used in the London Borough of Redbridge, and officers are keeping an eye on what it is achieving. Most of what I believe is undertaken in Redbridge is to engage the curb crawlers to explain why they are there and what are the consequences of engaging with prostitutes will be. They issue fixed penalty notes and they engage the women involved in prostitution to encourage exits. Redbridge does appear to have an outreach support service, which is not available in Norwich, which in Norfolk would be a service commissioned by Norfolk County Council as a public health function. Discussions with the constabulary at a senior level is that any further enforcement requires at the same time a solution focused on supporting the women. At this time, they do not support a PSPO focusing on street sex working. It is important to note that the police already have a variety of powers to deal with curb crawling as a criminal matter, and adding a PSPO for tackling curb crawling, I don't believe adds anything to resolve the problems in itself. This year, officers have discussed in detail the scope of a new PSPO and the addition of extra powers which may assist the police in managing antisocial behaviour. It is important, though, that the solutions include the necessary encouragement and support to change the sex worker's lifestyle. And although this work takes time, it has been shown to be successful in addressing the problems that arise. Dealing with the issue does require a multi-agency response covering drug and alcohol services, housing, probation and policing. I have therefore asked officers to take forward conversations with partners to seek a solution or solutions to the issues you're experiencing, which are a result of street sex working.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Abigail, you have an opportunity to ask a supplementary question if you would like to do that.
Yeah, this is our supplementary question. I think we guessed what Councillor Maguire's response would be to this in regards to the vulnerability of the street workers. So as a representative of the Thorpe Hamlet community, we've been working with the council and the police to tackle antisocial behaviour through enforcement, awareness and reporting. Even though the council need to regard the freedoms permitted under Articles 10 and 11 of the Human Rights Act 1998, the behaviour of a small number of individuals is having a detrimental impact on the quality of life and health and safety of the residents of Thorpe Hamlet. These activities are persistent and unreasonable. Would the Cabinet member either agree that an extension of the PSPO to tackle these is a proportionate response to the level of harm and nuisance being caused, or offer an alternative to counter them? And I know that you said it's to do with the causes of street prostitution. However, this has been ongoing in the Rosary Road area for over 10 years now, and we're not, we don't seem to be getting to the bottom of it. So we would like to know what the alternative is, because we feel that we've done everything we can so far that's within our power. We want to know what help the council can give us as residents of the Thorpe Hamlet community to deal with the antisocial behaviour that we are regularly experiencing as a result of the sex workers.
Okay, thank you for your supplementary. Councillor Maguire?
Yes, so you've asked a number of questions there and I'll try to answer them all. You've premised them on a number of issues, which might be questioned, but let's stick with that. So the two principal questions you're asking me: what is the alternative? What help can the council give? Because we are guided by the evidence, we are guided by the police and our other partners. And that ultimately is what will move us into any kind of action. At the moment, as I've said, and if I repeat this just to make it clear, that the discussions with the constabulary, at this time, they do not support a PSPO focusing on street sex working. So we will work with them, we will work with the evidence presented, and we will work with those other important partners. So I'm not going to give you a kind of a clear programmed answer, because it's a case of following what information we have, what information comes in. I can understand your perturbation at what happens along there. You must understand, and I'm sure you do, these are criminal activities. These are activities which the police have the powers and do use. They have additional powers which they have used on occasion. They have used surveillance. I'm not trying to defend the police, because I think they do a fantastic job, but this is a criminal matter and the police are working, and we will work with them as best guided by the evidence and those other partners. I think it's worth saying, it's interesting you talk about 10 years, because in the past 10 years, you've seen local government, certainly the City of Norwich, has something like 40% of its funding cut in real terms. But the City Council's very specific responsibilities is, as I've said before, there are housing responsibilities where there is homelessness. There are responsibilities with regard to noise. And but we do more than that, because we are concerned with public safety, and we will do what we can do as we are advised by our partners. This is very much a problem and a question that actually you need, and it's important that you pose to a number of agencies. Norwich City Council is but one of them.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. So can I thank Abigail and Fiona for attending this evening and presenting their points in a very, very clear and concise fashion, and that the work of that multi-agency operation needs to go on to address the issues that you've described and the underlying causes. So thank you very much for your attendance this evening. Okay, can we now move on, please? The minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of July, can we agree those as a true record? You put your hands up. I've been asked by Rachel to make sure that we all put our hands up, so we have it on evidence that we've on our positions on the votes tonight. So thank you very much. Good. Okay, so let's now move on then, please, to item 5, which is on page 9, the Greater Norwich Homeless Strategy 2020 to 2025, and that is in the name of Councillor Harris. Gail, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alan. The purpose of this report is to approve the new Greater Norwich Homelessness Strategy 2020 to 25. I welcome the opportunity to bring this paper to Cabinet, and it is in fact a legal requirement that local housing authorities produce a homelessness strategy. Since the last strategy 2015 to 20, the government has placed significant additional duties on councils to ensure that all households at risk of homelessness receive earlier and more effective intervention. It's worth highlighting what the Homelessness Reduction Act of 2017 requires us as an authority to do. It requires us to provide advice and guidance for all households approaching the local authority, and for the guidance to meet the needs of certain listed groups, including those living in prison, hospital or care, and those with mental health issues. It asks us to prevent those threatened with homelessness from becoming homeless, and to relieve homelessness from those who are homeless. Both prevention and relief duties last for 56 days. As an authority, even before this act, we have always worked incredibly hard on prevention. Preparatory work on the new strategy started in late 2018 and carried on into early 2019 through the Greater Greater Norwich Homelessness Forum. The forum meeting were well attended with a wide range of stakeholders with lived experience and from the voluntary and statutory sector. A number of interviews were carried out during 2019 with people with lived experience of homelessness. A review of all of our activity in the field of homelessness was conducted, including the use of data to produce the strategy and its proposed actions. I realise that this is set out in the paper in front of you today, but I really wanted to highlight that the production of this strategy has not been a quick process and has been as thorough as we could make it. The focus of the strategy looks at the determinants of homelessness such as youth and single homelessness, domestic abuse, relationship breakdown, low income, and how we can strengthen our prevention of homelessness duties. It should also be pointed out that for a number of years, the council has produced a rough sleeping strategy to help tackle and reduce the number of rough sleepers in the city. The reason why we publish a separate rough sleeping and homelessness strategy is that we want to give clear focus and ownership of our efforts to reduce rough sleeping in our districts. Again, it is important to note that this strategy is a Greater Norwich homelessness strategy, which mirrors other aspects of work within the council, such as the Greater Norwich local plan and the joint core strategy. There is such strength in working across councils to achieve the vision of the strategy. In fact, there is now work happening across the county at chief exec and leader level, which can only be a positive move. The vision for the strategy is powerful. Greater Norwich is a place where agencies work together to support people who are or may become homeless. By putting people at the heart of our service delivery, we can create a wraparound offer that helps people to take control of their own circumstances earlier, and stopping them from becoming homeless will be our main aim. This will provide people with a firm platform where their health and well-being, employment or training opportunities are either maintained or improved. This is, in fact, an incredibly detailed report with the main focus on 4 priority areas: to develop and deliver flexible housing and support solutions to enable people to safely move on from domestic abuse, preventing homelessness, single and youth homelessness, and financial inclusion, welfare reform and economic growth. Set below each of these priorities is a full list of actions. It is worth looking at the highlights of these actions in more details on pages 12 and 13 and on pages within the main strategy document. It's also important to acknowledge that mental ill health can be a significant factor in increasing the risk of homelessness, and also that for those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, there can be a negative impact on mental health. These facts are woven throughout our priorities. The strategy predicts that we are likely to see an increase in the number of homeless households. I don't think that any of us will disagree with this prediction. The effect of COVID-19 on the job market, the cost of private rented accommodation, the lack of social housing, welfare reform and universal credit, and an uncaring Tory government, a perfect storm. Norwich City Council has a prevention-based approach to dealing with homelessness since 2007. We are committed to providing an accessible service and achieve gold standard status, which recognises the success of our commitment and prevention of homelessness. The dedication of our officers should be recognised for the work they do day in and day out. They really do care. This document must remain relevant. So throughout the 5-year period, the priorities and actions will be reviewed by each Greater Norwich Council on an annual basis. I'd like to thank all involved in producing this strategy, no mean feat when working across councils. I commend that Cabinet approves the adoption of the strategy and the identified actions. Once adopted by all 3 Greater Norwich councils, the strategy will then be published on the council website in October of this year. I'm hoping that Chris Hancock might have joined this call so that he can pick up any detailed questions, but I move the report.
Gail, thank you very much. Very, very well presented and eloquent report. I'll take some Cabinet member colleagues first of all. Kevin?
Just briefly, I want to add my thanks also to this, to the officers who've worked really hard to make this policy such a good comprehensive one, which will be very effective. And I particularly want to mention, of course, that all the work that is done here impinges on my own portfolio responsibility for rough sleepers, and the kind of work that our officers have been doing, particularly during lockdown, has been fantastic, working on rehousing. And so this preventative work is one of the best ways that we can reduce and hopefully eventually abolish rough sleeping. So I just want to add my thanks. It's something that passes and affects other parts of our work.
Thanks very much, Kevin. I know from the time you took over your portfolio, you were very closely involved in the development of the homelessness strategy. So thank you for those comments. Can I just ask Lee or Chris, starting with Lee, whether you have any further comments you'd like to make on the report?
I obviously just add, obviously, thanks to the officers who've worked, particularly Chris when he comes in, so he saved him the embarrassment of sort of congratulating himself. So it's really sterling piece of work, really. But also, I think if you look at the list of partners contained in the main document, the amount of partnership work that not only produces the report but produces the outcomes and outputs linked to the report. It is a tremendous. There's a lot of people who are involved in and around this work, and I think the final thing for me is it just shows that the homelessness itself isn't just an obvious and apparent thing, but it's hidden. But I think, so is the work that people do, not just to react to homelessness, but more importantly to prevent it. I think, and quite often that's unseen work that goes into making sure that people aren't in crisis or emergency and can recover from life events or unfortunate circumstances. So it's really about that, and just to extend an invitation to members to obviously ask questions, come and see the work that we do, and just thank you all for your support in getting this report to you.
Thank you, Lee. Chris, anything you wanted to add at this stage?
Not particularly. I mean, it's just really just to add that a lot of the work has been through, as we said, is in a partnership approach and working with our statutory, our voluntary sector partners in Norwich and Greater Norwich, and through our Greater Norwich Homelessness Forum. And it's not without them and people who've experienced homelessness who've helped formulate this strategy, and that's really helped, I think, provide us a sound basis to work from. So really, it's just to say thank you to the people who've contributed to the strategy, and we're more than happy to talk to people if they want to come and speak to me around homelessness and partnership working and what we can do. So yes, that's it from me for now.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any other Cabinet members want to make any comments at all? No. Sandra, anything that you'd like to raise?
Yes, please. So first of all, this is obviously a very welcome overarching strategy, and I think the consultation responses highlight quite nicely how important it is that there is a focus on young people and homelessness prevention. And I think picking up on what Gail said around the COVID situation, I think that the current situation and the uncertainty around work and childcare will also make the group of lone parents much more vulnerable going forward. My question is more around sort of preventing homelessness going forward where people have found housing options. I've learned that the Centre for Homelessness Impact and Cardiff University are organising a randomised controlled trial to kind of assess which housing options have the most positive outcomes for people. And I was wondering whether Norwich City Council has expressed interest to be part of that randomised controlled trial, and if not yet, whether they would do so, as I understand the deadline is the 20th of September.
Okay, anyone like to pick up that specific question about this randomised sample research?
I'll pick it up. I'm not aware that we volunteered. And certainly have a look at what that is and whether it would improve benefits the service that we provide, if that's acceptable to the councillor and obviously to Councillors Maguire and Harris.
I think you could certainly send the report to the Cardiff team, because I think we have a an excellent story to tell. And what I like about this report, I mean, it is a really well-crafted report which looks at how we've been able to mitigate. And I think over the intense part of this wave of the COVID period, we've been able to provide the capacity to support people who are in danger of becoming homeless, not just those who are homeless, but I think that preventative work was an excellent part of the strategy. But it also presents us with the drivers for homelessness. And there are a range of very simple solutions to tackling that problem. There should be no need for homelessness. And this is an opportunity. I know we're discussing this with one of our local MPs, Chloe Smith, at the end of the week. She's raised this issue. So I think a copy of this report will be enlightening. So if there are no more questions or comments, can I minute my thanks as well to an exemplary piece of work, and to thank all those involved, both officers and politicians, in putting this together, and partners, of course. So we have some recommendations, which is to approve the new Greater Norwich Homelessness Strategy. The financial implications are met within existing budgets or additional grant income. So could we all put our hands up if we are happy with the recommendation? Thank you very much. That's agreed. So let's now move on then to item 6, which is the non-commercial debt policy. And this is Councillor Kendrick, who is presenting this report.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, for that. Actually, Karen Davis was going to actually present this report. Unfortunately, she isn't well, and she's having a test for COVID, so I'm sure we all wish her well. But I should pay tribute to the fact that she did a lot of work in regard to this. Now, as a local council, we have obviously a duty to collect monies from people, obviously in terms of such as, for example, housing rents and council tax. But we also have a duty to those who's obviously may be in some financial difficulties to be considerate and understanding towards the circumstances that they may find themselves. And this report, and I think it's an excellent report, actually shows and explains the kind of strategy that we will actually adopt. I think it would be useful actually at this stage to bring in the officers to discuss the technicalities of this, but I would actually very much pay tribute to them in actually producing this, I think, very fine report.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Before I ask Nikki Bristow, welcome to the Cabinet meeting, Nikki. Councillor Gail Harris would like to make a contribution.
Thank you, Alan. Like Paul, I acknowledge this is a really, really good piece of work. And I'd like to thank the officers concerned, and Nikki in particular, but I know that she's worked across departments, including housing, and that's been really, really important, because the only way we can move forward is working together. I'd also like to highlight the work that the Council's money advisors undertake. Their knowledge and expertise can be invaluable to our council tenants, and making sure that tenants are claiming benefits which they're rightly theirs, and making sure that when a tenant is trying to repay debt, they make realistic payment arrangements. I've seen this in action. I've been with some of my constituents, and it really is a wonderful experience, in knowing that someone can work their way through it with people who've got the expertise and get out at the other end in a far better place. I think the 60-day breathing space is most certainly to be welcomed, and I particularly like the section on vulnerable customers, because it's really clearly set out, and I think that was something that we've been missing before. It is, of course, the responsibility of debtors to engage with the council, and that can sometimes be quite difficult, but you know, we are very proactive in trying to make this happen. And I think also what is really good is that we're trying to get to the situation that when we're talking about somebody's debt, that we're looking across departments to see what debt is in which particular cubbyhole, in a way, because that's the only way we can start to make realistic arrangements for people and have a consistent and fair approach to our non-commercial debt. So thanks once again to the officers, and thank you, Nikki, for all the work you've done, and thank you for involving so many departments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Gail. Nikki, would you like to add anything to the comments that have already been made about the report?
I think the only thing that I would like to add is to echo what Gail has said, really, which is a thank you to all of the officers. This wasn't just down to me; it was initiated by Stella, and the work that has gone on from there has been across revenues and benefits, sundry income, housing. There's been so many people involved, but hopefully that will lead to the success of the policy. And the most important parts of it really are the introduction of breathing space, the standard financial statement, and the section on vulnerability, so that we actually really recognise those out there in society that are truly vulnerable.
Thank you, Nikki. Other Cabinet colleagues, any comments or questions? No? Sandra, do you have anything you'd like to raise?
I do, yes. First of all, I would like to say that I'm really glad to read that the policy stresses the need to look at debt collection on a case-by-case basis, which I think we all agree on. So I sat on at least 2 scrutiny committees that have discussed that communication to residents could include, or maybe should include, an easy read sheet, which translates issues into very basic points. This has been identified as an action that would help communication and support residents, and is especially important when communicating about debts, because that can obviously raise anxiety and trigger anxiety quite quickly. I'm glad to see that the strategy includes some pointers for good communication, but I think this does not go quite far enough. Could you please clarify whether the Councillor has made any further advancements on trialling the inclusion of easy read sheets, which are designed together and piloted on residents, please?
Okay, so accessible information is the question that Sandra's asking. Do we have any comments on that, Nikki?
Yeah, what I can say, it might not answer your question specifically, but we're doing some work at the moment, and today actually I've had a meeting with housing, looking at the rent statements that are about to go out, and what information we can put on there to simplify things. There has now been a link to NCAN actually embedded into the rent statement, so that people can access support quickly and easily. And also our communications team have been involved in and are still involved in doing some work looking at the revenues and benefits letters, and we'll also be looking at some of the rent letters to try and simplify them and make sure that they are easy read.
Okay, and Nikki, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Sandra, since you were on scrutiny committee, we've also been working with the UEA on tailoring letters, and they've done quite a lot of work with us on how we phrase letters, particularly across things like revenues and benefits. So that work is in train. Okay.
And I think the very good thing about this report is that the kind of close engagement across the piece, really, in terms of not only the different contributions, as Nikki was saying, to shaping this policy, but the fact that support for people is quickly identified, and support is then put in place to enable people to manage debt, and often get additional support from the council in terms of identifying where other benefits may be eligible for other resources. Okay, if there are no further questions, we're asked to approve the revised non-commercial debt policy. Could we please indicate if we are willing to do that? Okay, excellent. So let's move on to item 7, which is in my name. It's the Q1 Corporate Performance Report for 2020-21. The report lays out the framework in which we operate our performance reports and criteria against our 3 corporate priorities: people living well, great neighbourhoods, housing and environment, and inclusive economy. It also relates to maintaining a healthy organisation, and there is a roughly 100 outcome and output measures that we use. So as you will notice, this is probably the first time you will have seen the report in this brief overview format. And in the section Q1 performance data, you will see now that if councillors, officers, the general public want to interrogate particular pieces of performance data, that is now an online link to be accessed. And this is due to a change in reporting software. I hope people will have had a chance to look at this, but if not, in any case, for future reference, this is where that detailed, what's the word, granular information can be found. So there are also some adjustments in terms of refining the way that we record how services are delivered, and that relates particularly to the ICT performance indicator. COVID, as you will have read from this report, has had an impact on collecting data, but also on terms of some of the service standards, for example, street cleanliness, inspections, and so on, because of the lockdown. On page 73, there is a summary of the first quarter. So council performance is rated as amber, but in terms of achieving the targets by the end of the year, those are embedded and in place. So there have been some good areas, particularly good areas of performance, benefit reviews, planning satisfaction levels remain high, switch and save, delighted to see that people are saving something between 173 and 289 pounds from their energy bills, and energy poverty is one of our key areas of activity. Channel shift targets continue to be met this quarter, and I think that's been given a boost, as it were, by the fact that more people during the COVID period have been accessing our services digitally. And customer satisfaction levels remain above target. But in some of those areas under paragraph 12, the ability to meet some of our insulation targets have fallen back because of COVID, but there is a hope that later in the performance timetable that they will be brought up to speed. Residual waste levels, inevitably more people staying at home has generated more waste. Energy efficiency programs have not reach the targets that we seek to achieve, again because of the lockdown, but again there's the hope that that can be improved and increased, though some of it may be due to the fact that we are losing some of our better performing housing stock due to right to buy. And community groups, of course, have been less active in some contexts during this period, and the same with volunteering hours, again putting some limits on people, though we know through the support that people have been given during the COVID quarantine and lockdowns, that has been a very uplifting story of people helping their neighbours and helping the wider community. So that is a summary of some of the key issues. I'll open it to questions or observations from any cabinet members before I bring in Ruth to ask for her comments. Yeah, Kevin.
I just want to take this opportunity with regard to residual waste and recycling collections and food waste collection for that matter. Right through lockdown and the slow lifting of, our partners, BIFA, have been fantastic in the way they pulled all the stops out to keep their services up. These changes are due to individual behaviours, and it's interesting because it shows how important any changes long term that we are going to get in terms of carbon reduction and so on, we have to work on those individual behaviours. But I just want to say thank you again to BIFA because they've done a fantastic job.
Okay. Ruth, could I just ask you if you have any comments about the new system or any particular points you'd like to highlight?
Just to say that hopefully the new dashboard will mean the data's easy to use for you and you can interact with it a bit more, but do provide us any feedback as and when you're using it if there are things that that you think of, because it will be something that we can develop over time. And we are still backfilling data where we can, where it becomes available, where the data wasn't possible to be collected during lockdown. So there should be some of the past data that will appear in that as and when we can collect it.
Yeah, and can I add my thanks for the piece of work that that you've done with Adam in putting this new software in. It's a very good system to interrogate, and it is in glorious colour, which always helps with data sets of information. Stephen.
Hiya. Yeah, just to kind of reiterate, I think the new way of presenting this info is much clearer, which is also helping us when we scrutinise this at senior officer level with the team. You know, clearly COVID has had an impact on some of these performance indicators, things such as waste and recycling, as it says, a huge amount of increase in waste being produced, but also things such as volunteering in parks. Clearly, you know, that hasn't gone ahead. Just to kind of give members assurance that we are continuing to focus on performance at officer level. And what I do want to do moving forward is start to drill down into some of these issues. So things such as waste and recycling. What are the issues that are stopping us kind of getting above the kind of 40% level? And as members know, we will be taking forward a series of service reviews over the next 6 to 8 months, and because kind of performance issues will be considered as part of that process. So as well as considering the quarterly performance report, we will be drilling down into some of these issues to try and get behind the data and understand what the barriers to kind of driving up performance is in some of these areas.
Thanks, Stephen. That's very, very helpful. Any other Cabinet colleagues? Any comments? Okay, Sandra, do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
I have a very brief question. I share your hope that that the number of installations and the number of council houses with energy rating C will go up in the future again. And I was wondering, obviously we've got the Green Homes Grant coming up. Will the council take any part in promoting that Green Homes Grant, and will the council get any benefit from the Green Homes Grant Local Authority Delivery Scheme, please?
Okay, thanks, Sandra, for the question. Are we in a position to answer that at the moment? Right. I think, therefore, Sandra, it's a very good question. We'll get back to you and get that included in the minutes, if that's okay. Yeah, thanks for the question. Okay, so if there are no more questions, can we go to the recommendations on page 71? Which is the review of the progress against the corporate plan priorities. And I think we've had some discussion about how we're going to continue to move forward in this area to be able to use the data effectively and drill down and obviously sort of pick up other opportunities that will enhance our performance. So 2 recommendations. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you very much. So let's now move on, please, to item number What's that one? 7, 8. Okay, so this is the Q1 revenue, capital and budget monitoring, and it's Paul. Paul, you'll need to unmute, please. Looks like Paul is frozen for the moment.
Can you hear me now?
We're delighted to have you back in the room.
Sorry.
Were.
Technical troubles there. Never mind. That's why I come into City Hall, because at least you want to get help here. Right, the Q1 report shows the financial position as at the 30th of June 2020, and the forecast outturn for the financial year 2021. The report shows that despite an extensive process to identify savings this year, Council still faces a significant overspend due to the financial pressures of dealing with the COVID-19 epidemic. This comes despite additional funding from government. The current general fund forecast is an overspend of 1.3 million, which will need to be met from the Council's reserves. With the impact of COVID likely to continue into the next year and demand on local services going up, pressure on Council finances will remain. The report shows how increased spending on costs on issues such as housing, rough sleeping, providing food for the vulnerable people, enabling Council staff to work efficiently from home, combined with the loss of income from sources such as car parks, commercial rents and events, have all contributed to the current financial situation. Council has responded by identifying in-year savings of about £3 million to reduce the overall budget impact. This has been achieved through detailed review of internal spending. Key forecast variants from budget are set out in Table 1 of the report. Additional grant fundings and details of its use are set out in Table 2. The housing revenue account is also impacted by the pandemic, and the revenue budget is forecast to be overspent by 3.5 million. This is mainly due to the projected loss of income in relation to housing rent and service charges, although this has partly been offset by forecast underspend on repairs works due to the pandemic. And I just add, and I think this is an important thing to say, is that the monies that government has given to this local authority and indeed other local authorities have been entirely insufficient to match both the increased spending that local government set to spend, but also the loss of income. And a lot of local authorities are going to be in a dire financial position where their shortfall will actually be more than their total amount of reserves. Fortunately, we're not in that situation, but still we will be badly impacted. Capital. Project managers have participated in a review of the 2021 capital programme to assess the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic will have on the delivery of individual projects. As at the end of June, the General Fund capital programme is forecast to be underspent by £2.5 million. The variation is mainly due to delays in City Hall heating infrastructure, refurbishment of St Andrews Hall, and lower forecast community infrastructure levy contributions to the strategic pool. The housing capital programme is forecast to be underspent by 10.7 million. This is based on an analysis of the impact that disruption caused by the pandemic is expected to have on the delivery of housing revenue stock upgrades and the new build programmes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Hannah and Sean, do you have anything you'd like to add? Hannah first.
No, just to echo obviously what Councillor Kendrick said, in that we've had it's been a significant impact on the council finances from the COVID-19 pandemic. And the Q1, we've updated the forecast based on the best information we have available to us. But obviously it's going to be a key task for us to continue to monitor that and update it as we go through the year. The first government return in terms of the income compensation scheme is due at the end of September. And so we're working on completing that at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Sean, anything?
No, nothing to add.
Okay. And Annabelle, you're here for today. Anything you'd want to add to this report?
No, I just think though it would be really nice to acknowledge it's really lovely to come in and see this work on in train. There's a lot of work gone into this. There's a lot of monitoring going on behind the scenes. All services are engaged in the process and looking at next year as well. So it's actually a really positive position. I appreciate the numbers aren't quite where you'd like them to be, but the reality is there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to actually manage this, which is very positive.
Yes, thank you, Annabelle. That's a point very well worth making. Any other Cabinet colleagues like to add anything? All right. Yes, Gail.
Only to echo what's been said before, the tremendous amount of work that is going on in monitoring this and trying to make sure that we perform as well as we are absolutely able. COVID-19 has caused havoc across the country with people's health and well-being, and it's causing havoc with local government finances. So thank you for the clear presentation today.
Thank you, Gail. Sandra, anything you want to raise on this report?
Yes, please. I note that the government income loss scheme does not cover lost income from commercial investment, which is obviously bad news, as we were hoping to have regular income from a number of premises that we've invested. The report details the forecast for the rental income, but looking further into the future, what work is being done to assess the long-term viability of the commercial investments in the new context? Is there any risk of early vacancies that we can foresee? Any risk of any of the premises, any of the investments becoming unviable? And could you please also comment on the future of the airport industrial estate and the associated income from that, please?
Several questions.
Sorry.
Right. So on a technical, there's a political point, I think, in response to your question, which I will come on to, but there are some specific points about funding streams to the council. Anybody like to pick one or more of those up? Anybody? Hannah?
So in terms of the security of that income stream going forwards, what I would say is that there's a lot of active management of the portfolio going on at the moment with our joint venture partners. It's about an ongoing dialogue with all of our tenants to understand their situations and to be proactive in understanding where there is the potential for vacancies, understanding when the next breaks are in leases and managing those essentially in the best way we possibly can. So there's a lot of work going on in that space. To date, we haven't had any significant numbers of leases being terminated. So I think that's showing the benefit of having those discussions and coming up with agreements that where we've got good tenants in place, can secure those over the long term.
Yes, and there's been done a lot of work for, as Hannah says, with different businesses in the city. Some of those are our tenants, so they pay rent as well as business rates. But there's also the issue around business rates and business rates deferral to later in the cycle, some government support for that, obviously, but there's also work that we've been doing to make sure that we can sustain these businesses and their cash flow over this difficult period. The broader point, I think, I'm going to bring in Paul before I continue. Paul?
Yes, I do accept that it's obviously disappointing that we've lost revenue from commercial properties, obviously due to the pandemic. But of course, had we not actually invested in commercial properties, we would have had no additional income in the first place. So I think that has to be looked at it from that viewpoint. And in fact, the new properties that we've taken on board in the last few years have actually performed better in terms of actual rental payments than our traditional older base.
Yeah. And the more fundamental question is that the model of local government finance has changed over the last 10 years from a needs-based model built into the revenue support grant system, which has been, as everybody knows, whittled away, and government's replacement with a series of financial commercial opportunities to generate additional income to replace that. So the localization of business rates is one illustration of that. The fact is local government finance, as its current model, is shot to pieces. it needs to be rebuilt, and everybody in local government, irrespective of their political allegiance, understands the need that if we are continue to provide services for the long term across a very wide landscape of responsibilities, then we need a local government finance system which enables that to happen. And not only are we seeking to engage the government in terms of recognising the costs of COVID to its key partner, which is local government, and we've made our representations along those lines, but that also it needs to work with local government to make sure that as we move forward into what will continue to be very uncertain times, that local government is sufficiently funded to be able to play that key role, which we have done since the beginning of the year. Stephen.
The only point I would add to kind of how we're managing this and support what Hannah says, there is a huge amount of work going on to work with commercial tenants and to kind of work through the issues in a pragmatic way, and I think that is proving by and large successful. The other point to make is that when we do invest in commercial assets, even before COVID came along, we have recognised that that investment can go up and it can go down, and therefore we do set aside a contingency in that when we do that investment to guard against that as a mechanism. The airport industrial estate was mentioned. I mean, Graham might be able to give an update, but work has begun on that to assess the future of that asset and what might, you know, what our options might be around that. So there is work ongoing to assess that.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Graham, do you need to add anything more than Stephen's observation?
There isn't a great deal more I can add. Just 2 points I think I would make in response to the question was that there's a wider review of our commercial property investment strategy that we need to undertake, which was flagged up originally as one of the actions in the C19 recovery plan that we agreed through Cabinet in June, which is due to follow, but understandably a lot of the resources that would be looking at that are obviously tied into the more pressing issue of the commercial rent negotiations that we are going through with to support our tenants to ensure that we maximise the income that we get into the council. And on the airport industrial estate, yeah, we're sort of part way through a wider exercise, working jointly with the county council to consider some of the strategic options there. Clearly, in the longer run, we have a set of industrial premises that particularly have an environmental challenge in terms of their performance, with comparative poor energy performance ratings on some of the buildings there. So we need, again, an exercise to work through what the future investment strategy is going to be and how those units are going to be managed in future. And we're part way through that exercise, which I can't really say a great deal more about at this current juncture.
Okay, thanks very much. So you've had a comprehensive set of answers, Sandra. You should be very pleased with those. Right, okay. So can I just add once again that the quality of the financial information that we receive as elected members is of a very high standard, and we appreciate all the work that is done to do that, but also the work that's done to give us the very best financial information so we can make the very best decisions. Okay, with that entree, can we agree the recommendations on page 79? Thank you very much. Okay, now let's move on to item 9, which is page 105, and it's the Treasury Management Full Year Review. Paul, over to you.
This report details the results of the Council's Treasury management activities for the financial year 1920. It compares this activity to the Treasury Management Strategy, which was approved by the Full Council on the 26th of February 2019. Table 1 shows capital expenditure totaled 77.5 million. Of this, 35.2 million has been financed immediately through the application of capital or revenue resources, e.g. capital receipts or capital grants. The remaining 42.3 relating to commercial property investments has increased the council's overall borrowing need. Table 2 shows the closing capital financing requirement of 321.3 million. This is the cumulative total of the 1920 financial year unfinanced capital expenditure of 42.3 million and the prior year's unfinanced capital spend. Table 3 shows the actual borrowing as of the 31st of March, which totaled 219.4 million. An additional 20 million of borrowings undertaken during the year. Council has continued to maintain an under-borrowed position in the financial year 1920. This means that the capital borrowing need has not been fully funded with loan debt, as cash supporting Council's reserves, balances and cash flow has been used as a temporary measure. The strategy is prudent as investment returns are low, although external borrowing is expected to be made in the financial year 2021. The prudential indicators in relation to the capital finance requirement, the authorised limit and the operational borrowing boundaries have been complied with in this year. The investment activity during the year conformed to the approved strategy, and the Council has had no liquidity difficulties. The Council paid 7.9 million in interest costs on external loans. This compares with a budget of 8.9 million. The report recommends that Cabinet approve the Treasury Management Policy statement set out in Appendix 1. It sets out the policy's objectives and approach to the risk management of Council's Treasury activities. The policy is in line with that recommended by the Pspo Code of Practice on Treasury Management. I therefore formally move we agree the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Paul. Hannah, anything to add?
No, thank you.
No. Annabelle, anything you'd like to say? Right.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for anybody? Any Cabinet members? Sandra, I know you want to ask a question, so it's all right. Nobody else? Okay, Sandra.
Okay, thank you. So due to the pandemic and the ongoing impacts of it, the Council's revenue may look very different this financial year. And I guess we can expect that both the revenue in the General Fund as well as the HRA may be affected and potentially reduced. Could you please comment on what this may mean for the affordability ratio going forward and whether the financing of the debt through the revenue streams will continue to be affordable, especially in the case of the HRA?
Okay. Hannah, would you like to pick that up?
Annabelle to go Michael, I wasn't sure she wanted to go first. I mean, yes, there may be impacts on the income, particularly the housing revenue account this financial year. But actually, I think with the HRA in particular, you need to think very much long term about that, the borrowing that the HRA has taken. We work over a 60-year business plan now to understand how the HRA is going to work and the investment needed over that kind of length of time span. So although there will be impacts on the income this year, I think when you consider it in the round, there aren't any kind of difficulties in terms of affordability for that borrowing as we move forward.
Okay, right. Any other comments or questions, colleagues? Right, let's go to the recommendations. Page 105, approve the Treasury Management Statements and recommend that the Council note the report on the Treasury activity for the year to the 31st of March 2020. All those in favour, please indicate. Okay, thank you very much. Let's then move on to item 10, and this is the write-off of non-recoverable national non-domestic rate debts. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you very much. Well, we obviously do as much as we can to actually collect non-domestic national non-domestic rate debts. And we work very hard to this, but there are occasions where, for example, due to liquidations, we cannot actually recover them. Now, it should always be said that even if you write a debt off, it doesn't mean that it prevents you in future from actually pursuing the matter further if you can do so. But in this case, we've had to write off about £86,000 because the company, as again, it's food limited, went into liquidation. There's really very little we can do about this. So while obviously writing off any amount of money is a rather sad, distasteful thing, it's something that we really have to do in terms of a good bookkeeping. So I would support the recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Anything to add from officers on this report? Hannah or Annabelle? No? Okay. Yes, I know, and we know how exhaustively our officers chase these debts. So any comments or questions from Cabinet members? No? Sandra, do you have a question? Right, okay. So can we effectively note that report and write off the £86,000 plus as irrecoverable? Please indicate. Accept the recommendation. Thank you very much. Okay, that's agreed. Let's then move on to item 11, the award of a contract for the Idocs uniform system. Paul, again.
Yes, I mean, it should be paid overtime. In April of this year, the council insourced its IT provision. Prior to this, the service was run on our behalf by LGSS. As a consequence of the transfer of the IT services back in-house, we now have to renew a number of ongoing contractual arrangements for key systems. This report deals with continuous use of the Idocs uniform system. It is through this system that we run our planning applications, licensing functions, and food safety inspections, to name but a few. As part of the transformation program, we are reviewing all our IT systems. However, given the reliance that many services areas have on this system, there are significant risks and resource implications to doing this now. This report proposed, therefore, to renew the contract for 3 years and review the use of Idocs uniform as part of a wider review of key IT systems. So I formally move the recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much. Nikki, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. That was perfect description.
Yes, very good. Right, anybody else? Any cabinet members, other officers? No. Sandra, is this something that interests you beyond the fact that it's very important that you want to ask a question? No. Okay, so can we go to the recommendation? So there's a 3-year contract award to give us continuity across some key areas of council activity. Please indicate if you're happy with the recommendations. Great, thank you very much. So now we go on to item 12, and it's Gail.
Thank you, Alan. The council has a statutory duty to service and maintain all heating systems in our own housing stock. We have to ensure that all domestic boilers are serviced each year in accordance with the relevant legislation and regulations. This is an incredibly important programme of work, minimising any risk to safety from carbon monoxide poisoning and gas explosion. In addition, the council maintains a number of district heating systems and communal boilers which heat flats and sheltered housing blocks. These are also maintained within the same contract. You'll be familiar with the council's use of Eastern Procurement Limited from previous contract awards. More detail can be found in paragraph 4, but being a member of this consortium gives us a collective advantage of increased buying power and takes away the burden of procurement from individual members. Right. This has led us to the use of the EPL framework for housing services and repairs. Heating. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback here. So this has led us to the use of the EPL framework for heating services and repairs. Following a mini tender and evaluation of 6 tender submissions, Gasway Services attained the highest evaluation score. The financial consequence of this report is at a cost of £6,288,817.60 over a 4-year period, and the new contract represents a saving of approximately £67,000 per year on existing rates. This saving is really good news, as is in fact that Gasway Services Limited is a Norwich-based firm. It's pleasing that we're able to bring this report to Cabinet well in advance of the existing contract running out. The fact that Gasway Services Limited will continue to deliver this service gives us reassuring continuity, and having the contract in place also preempts any possible delays that COVID-19 could cause later in this year. Therefore, I move the recommendation to award the contract for the housing heating systems servicing and repairs to Gasway Services Limited.
Thank you very much, Gail.
Neil Watts is in attendance if he might want to add anything to what I've just said.
Yep, I was about to ask him, but thanks for that. And yeah, Neil, do you have anything you'd like to add? You need to unmute.
Yes, apologies for that. No, nothing else to add to that. Very comprehensive.
Thanks very much. Any questions, Cabinet members? Sandra? Okay, right. So can we go to the recommendation to award the contract for housing, heating system servicing and repairs to Gasway Services Limited? Please indicate if you support. Thank you very much. So let's go on now, please, to item 13, page 143, and it's the City Council leisure provision, and Councillor Matt Packer.
Thank you, Alan. This paper recommends that funding from our emergency COVID-19 grant fund is used to ensure the continuation of the Council's current contractual arrangement with Places Leisure to run the Riverside Leisure Centre. Our residents have been accessing our parks and open spaces for their health and well-being throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. However, a great many people will have missed not being able to access the wide range of facilities at the Riverside Leisure Centre, particularly the swimming pool. Since it reopened on the 1st of September, residents have been accessing it, although albeit in different ways than previously. Prior to COVID-19, there were 3,600 members with 465,000 visits during 2019 to 20. The facilities are priced to make access affordable to our residents, including those on low incomes. And not only does the centre offer health and well-being benefits to our residents, it contributes to the local economy through employing over 70 members of staff. This report does note that we are working in uncertain times. However, I hope Cabinet supports the recommendation, which will contribute towards enabling our residents to maintain and improve their health and well-being.
Thanks very much. Nikki, are you here?
Yes, I am. So I was just going to add to that this is actually set in a national context, because this is happening to councils up and down the country in terms of their leisure provision, because obviously we are in very unusual times with leisure provision being one of the last things that's been able to sort of come online. So we do sit within a family of other authorities, and we have been liaising with those other authorities over the last few months.
Yeah, thank you. No, okay. Any Cabinet questions? It's very good to see this facility up and running again. Very good indeed. Right, Sandra, any comments? No. Okay, I just want to ask colleagues. There's a below the line report with the financial detail, though you know the key headline figures are in the above the line report. Does anybody have any questions relating to the below the line report? Okay, so we can take the recommendations there on the basis that we're happy with the below the line element to this report. So can we then move to the recommendation, which is on page 143, to pay Places Leisure negotiated costs associated with the enforced closure of the Riverside Leisure Centre and estimated recovery costs in this financial year, subject to an open book reconciliation. Hands up if you agree with that. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So that's the last above the line report. We now leave this particular part of the session, and we'll need to log in again. Could we log in again? I think, Lucy, how much time do you need?
About 5 minutes.
Okay, so 5 minutes it is, and we re-log in with the below the line Zoom details. Okay, so to the members of the public who've been watching this, Thank you very much for your attendance, and see many of you shortly.